Hey, well, welcome to the Stronger Marriage podcast. This is episode 1, and Joy and I are so thrilled that you're able to tune in. We're here today with Stan Scoma, his wife, Lindsey, and we are jacked to have y'all here, man. I know that most people from the church would know who you are, but there are quite a few who don't. And so why don't y'all tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're at in life, if you got babies, and maybe a short little story of how you met.
That's not short, but go ahead, Stan.
Yeah, and it differs, so it just depends on who's telling the story.
I'm Lindsey.
I'm Stan.
We're the Scomas. We have 3 babies.
Yep, 7, 5, and 2.
Yep, Liam, Landon, and Layla.
Just celebrated our 10 year, so we
Let's go.
got to that
That's
milestone.
In Portugal.
That's right.
Yeah.
So planning our 20
In
year.
Portugal. Huh?
Planning the 20 year.
Oh, yeah.
Back in Portugal.
Next year.
You never know.
Do y'all need friends to go with you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's go.
We'd love that. That'd be fantastic. We'll just drive from there to Egypt, and we're just kind of do this like
Let's
massive
go.
tour.
Or from Egypt.
We can start there. Yeah.
How do we meet? You tell the story because
The
the details are better with him.
consolidated version, we met in church, and
Mhm.
we got married, and it's been a
That's
wrap.
super
That is
consolidated.
the
A little more
consolidated.
Yeah.
Dude, yes.
If you're looking
Okay,
for
we
some
met in
ladies,
church.
join crew.
We met. So Stan has been at the church since he was a kid,
Mhm.
and I've been here for almost 20 years, which is
That's crazy.
So that
like
makes her
crazy. Don't even try.
27.
Don't even try. So I actually knew him. He was in a previous relationship, and I knew of him because of that relationship. And
Okay.
so had kind of only recognized him from there. Started serving in young adults with his twin brother.
What's up,
And
Sam?
became friends. And then Stan started coming around more often. Didn't really we were
It wasn't
feisty.
love at first sight.
Yes, it wasn't.
but
I was trying to
It
figure out
might
how
have
to say
been
that
lust at
nicely.
first sight.
Okay.
Okay,
Is
on
that-
your
Wasn't
part.
that either.
That's honest.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what we want is honesty
yeah.
here.
I was doing
No.
CrossFit at the time, so
Oh
I
my
think that really
gosh.
helped.
He was
Touche.
actually. I do remember his lats. Not a lie.
That's what I'm talking about. Like a tiger. Like you said, I was saying that, like a tiger.
We definitely had sparks fly, but maybe in the opposite direction.
Mm.
So
She didn't really like me.
yeah, that's
It-
more of the.
So I just finished reading Pride and Prejudice, which is like a favorite of hers, and I'm absolutely like that's our story of like she didn't like me. I was a little bit assuming that she would like me, that she'd fall in love, and she said no.
Didn't happen.
So
We,
then
I
asked her
said no a couple
again.
of times. He basically, we went through. I said no a couple of times. The Lord worked on my heart. Ended up saying yes.
Yeah.
We lived apart for a couple of
Yeah.
months. As far as like he lived in Tennessee, I was in South Carolina still. We dated through that.
Yep.
Dated for a year and 4 months, I think, and then got engaged. So,
That's good.
anyways,
You know, you gotta. What's the Bible say? Stand at the door and knock.
Yeah.
yes,
So
he was
I'll knock-
knocking.
I'll
for
knock
sure.
first.
Persistency
Knocking.
matters.
But weren't we on their first date together?
That wasn't a
That
date.
wasn't- that was like a
when we
group
were, like,
fun-
under the radar trying to.
I'm
Yeah.
taking
things
credit.
in
I feel
motion.
like there was a glue there.
Yeah.
And
We can
You guys
pop a
definitely
picture up of
get
that
credit.
game.
There's many relationships that are important. You guys were
Yeah,
up there,
critical.
made it happen.
We had some coffee shop
Yes,
talks.
we did.
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So you guys have been married for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, you are a stellar example of a marriage relationship. So today we're talking more about like the foundation of what marriage is. Yesterday, I took the whole Sunday to dedicate to that idea. So my question for y'all and my wife as well, is there anything that was kind of distinct for you that stood out?
I think for me, it was, we actually talked about this in the car, but partnership,
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
is huge for us, which was what I was going to say is like the most standout thing in general for us, not just from the sermon, but I feel like God has wired us to do so much together.
Mm.
And I know that not everybody has that luxury in some circumstances or the desire maybe in others.
Right.
But we have, just in our 10 years, I mean, I was going through in my mind and I'm like, we've done so much together. And even he works from home and that dynamic with our kids and homeschooling. And there's just, it's just really interesting. And it's not necessarily something I feel like we sewed into. It's more like, this is what the Lord has handed us. And so I think partnership is huge for us. a lot of sparks flew in the beginning, especially opening up the coffee shop of how do we work together.
Yeah.
And but I think partnership is a huge part of how we're able to enjoy one another as well through all of that stuff. I think that's been huge. But I don't know about
there's a huge difference. Joy and I, we joke when we were in Panama City, she worked at the church that I worked at.
Yeah.
But it became very evident very soon that we could not have that employee relationship
Right.
and then go home to help them.
Right.
And so it is a different thing when you're talking, because I think we have a great partnership.
Right.
But as far as like working on a staff together where one is
Right.
like over the other, it wasn't gonna work for
It's
us.
different.
So the sparks do fly.
That is not a
Yeah.
partnership. That's why. So that's why.
Touche.
Said correction.
Touche. But it is different.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah,
good.
it totally. You got to draw boundaries. I mean, especially whenever we were still owned the business, you have to draw boundaries and say this is not allowed during these time periods to have conversations
roles.
because we have to protect,
Yeah.
the relationship. You got to turn something off. So,
Yeah.
but
Totally.
yeah.
That's hard. That's tough. What about you, Lev?
Yeah, you didn't tell me to
Did you
bring my
listen?
nose. I was in there for like
Dude,
20
okay,
minutes.
while you're thinking, I've
She's
got to say
busy.
the
Joyce,
funniest
call
part.
me out.
I've got to tell you the funniest part of the sermon while you're
I know,
thinking.
and I didn't get to hear it.
The best part of the
Told me.
sermon was near the end when I said, I don't want people to walk away with just theory or theology. I want to give you practical steps. And I went through, pray for your spouse, intentional time and all this. And I said, have consistent sex with your spouse. And there was a lady to my left. And it was dead silent because so awkward. You got 1,000 people there and they're just like, oh, what did he say? And this lady on the front row, she goes, amen. And dude, everybody in the room lost it. Everybody in the room lost
She
it.
broke the ice.
And as soon as they stopped laughing, her husband said, glory.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody, dude. It was amazing.
I didn't get to hear
Why
that.
are they
but
not on the
I need to
podcast?
hear
Yeah,
that.
we need to
They
add
should be
them.
your
We need to
opening.
add them.
I need that clip too.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay, so I think one of the hardest ones for anyone, but of course, marriage is pruning. And I think, when we think of the Lord pruning us, he's always doing, we think of gardening, like when you're pruning. Lindsay talks to me about gardening so much.
Whether she wants to hear it or not.
Thank you. No, I need all the help I can get. But oftentimes you don't realize that pruning process is helping to bring growth about.
Yeah.
And so you think of that with the Lord, but you think of that in our relationship. And it's one of the most vulnerable relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that you can be exposed to so much in a marriage relationship. And I think it exposes your vulnerabilities, it exposes your sins, it exposes your weaknesses, your strengths, all the good. But it also, when I think of pruning, I think of the bad.
Yeah.
And so I think that part is one of the hardest parts of marriage, but I think it's probably one of the most vital.
Yeah.
And so
That's
Yeah.
I don't like that part,
Yeah, for sure.
but it's so helpful on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you got two whole people coming together, and you got to figure out how to make one whole with the
Yeah.
two.
And you're
it's hard.
changing, developing, growing. So
Yeah.
yes.
it's a dance.
And the seasons are always changing.
Yeah.
Always changing. So, and when we got married, we were
Children.
We were
Should have been
children.
illegal.
We say that it should have been illegal. Like we're 20 and 19 years old, and so even thinking of who we were then versus who we are today, we're literally completely different people. But we had to choose. Okay, but we're still going to do this together.
Yeah.
And so no matter if that's the hard, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. And so in the midst of the processes and seasons, you become different people. But we're choosing to do it together.
And dude, it's not just, okay, so you hit on it. Like you're evolving together, but you're also changing as an individual.
Right.
And it's not just spiritual. It's not just emotional. Sometimes physically.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, yeah.
there's a thing called menopause that we haven't landed in yet, but it's
The
coming.
new thing is
Children
the new thing is
Menopause.
perimenopause.
It's a thing.
But
Yeah.
for men, there the midlife thing is a real thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's not just that you're changing together. And so it is really a grace of God that somehow he miraculously uses all of that junk for our
Miracle.
betterment,
Yeah.
and it's super humbling. I told somebody today, I said, it's kind of ironic. I said, I don't feel like Joy and I argue a ton. I said, but leading into this series this week, at the end of this week, we got into an argument. Right. And so like all day yesterday, like I'm preaching to the church. I'm preaching to myself, bro.
so mad.
I'm like, dude, I felt like such a hypocrite
So
half
it
the time.
goes.
I'm talking about like not being selfish, but being selfless. And the whole time I'm like, you're an idiot. You're so dumb, and all this stuff. But
I'm a worm.
right. But I'm also like, it's in that moment that I'm like, well, God is exposing that in me,
Yeah.
and hopefully, he'll prune that off of me.
That's
But-
also the realness of marriage and of
Right.
day-to-day life. Like, we are not perfect. Our marriage is not perfect. Our day-to-day life is not perfect. Our parenting is not perfect. And so, unfortunately, we don't have to get up on a stage and preach it, but you do.
Right,
And so,
right.
and the truth still stands and
Right.
it
Yeah,
still
yeah,
remains.
for
So
sure.
I know that doesn't probably feel good in the
No,
moment,
But I mean, it is what it is.
Right.
But there are those crystallizing moments where you're like, I'm still not a finished product.
That's
Like,
why we
even
were
as-
like, why did you ask us to do this? Because we're like,
and I think our marriage is exceptional.
yeah,
But it's a revelation of like,
Right.
man, we're still not there.
Yeah.
Never will be.
absolutely.
Such a process.
absolutely.
So let me ask y'all this. Okay. So being 10 years down the road, if you had to look at a couple who was like 1 year in or 2 years in, and let's say they're in their mid 20s, what do you think, as we talk about all of the, we talked about the difference between a secular understanding of marriage and a sacred understanding of marriage. Talked about all the purposes of marriage. Like, what would be the thing you would look at that couple and you would say, man, I have seen the enemy use this to separate, to bring division, to sow discord, to bring, an unhealthy level of relationship. What have you seen, and what would you warn somebody, I guess,
Yeah.
would be like the key thing if there was one or two things that stuck out? And while you're doing
Yeah.
that, I'm actually, you know what? I'm going to ask Chat, see what he says.
Chatty chat.
Yeah.
Janista.
If I were the devil,
Oh, my
I
gracious.
love these questions.
You are
How you
so
frame it.
funny.
It's a good AI prompt.
You want to go first, or
Yeah. The when we got married, you're going through all the cards that you get from all the folks that were there, and they write down just like one-liners and little pieces of advice.
Yeah.
An old boss of mine at the nuclear plant I was working at, he wrote down a line in my card to me, and it's the line that I write down now for every marriage card that I write to the couple, and it says, "Don't sweat the small stuff. ... It's all small stuff." And if you can really grasp that in light of eternity, but even more kind of like into this relationship, in light of the 50 years that maybe we'll have together, almost all of it is small stuff. And I think if you can really get to that point of saying, hey, this is not a hill I have to die on, there are certain moments. But if this is not that moment of just letting it be okay and admitting when you're wrong or admitting when you've hurt somebody's feelings and asking for forgiveness. We were talking about this in the car of how, it doesn't matter if I'm 98% the victim, 2% the person who caused harm to you. The Bible calls me to come and seek forgiveness from you. And so I think if you have that approach of saying, like, I need to lay down who I am, my own pride, and kind of like these emotions that I'm dealing with, to just say, like, it's going to be okay, and not have contempt in your heart for the individual. I remember PD said one of the number one stats of a failing marriage is contempt towards the spouse.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the indicator for divorce.
Yeah.
And I think if you can fight that emotion to say, I want to stay mad at the other individual, that can really help.
tell me real quick while we're on contempt. Studies do show that contempt is like the number one indicator for divorce. Okay. But what does contempt look like? Like, what does that look like?
I think it's holding on. So, as a spouse, I think you see different things in each other for the good and for the bad, and I think holding on to what you recognize as bad and not letting that thing go,
Yeah.
Wow.
and
yeah,
not
okay.
allowing the other person the space to develop and to grow in itself is a trap, because there's no room for them. You're the, second closest thing in their life other than their walk with the Lord. There's no room for them to blossom or to develop. And so that contempt kind of snuffs out those seeds that might be developing in them. And that's dangerous, especially when you're walking with God and he's constantly doing that work of pruning and developing in you. So,
Yeah, and advocating. Like, if you can't be their biggest fan, I think that there's contempt there to say, like, I can't say, we deal with our boys all the time. Sometimes it feels like Cain and Abel in our house, and we're
Lord
like,
help.
can you please just celebrate your brother? Like, that they are your best friend.
Yeah.
And if there's ever a moment where I'm not feeling like I can celebrate Lindsey,
Not
there's
for
a
the
check
person.
that I
Yeah.
have to do to myself. And wanting to, God has given the marriage to satisfy so many different emotional needs inside of a human, right?
Yeah.
You know, psychologically, there's all sorts of like boxes that need to be checked from a motivation standpoint. And if I'm going to somebody who's not my spouse or something that's not my spouse to check those boxes, it's called a coping mechanism.
That's right.
And if I'm coping and not dealing with the root emotion of maybe I'm feeling lonely, maybe I'm feeling excluded, or for men, maybe I'm not feeling respected, then I need to actually check my own heart and say, am I right with her first? And what do I need to get right? Creating that contempt barrier. And it's hard when you've created that wall of contempt. You start to lie to yourself. You start to tell yourself they are not for me. And so that means I need to reciprocate.
Or that you have the right to have the contempt. Like you said, you could be 98% in the right. And still, you know, we're not supposed to hold that against them. I think of it in the way of my children when they do something wrong against me, or maybe they lie to me or they raise their voice. Like, I don't hold that against them like the next day or whatever. But I find often it's easier in marriage to the next day, I can still be holding that junk. And so I try to kind of mirror those of going, why can I do it for my kids, but I can't do it for my spouse? And so contempt is a hard one, especially if you feel like you're right.
I think so much of that is because we occur offenses. Like you're talking about, we've been married 26 years, you've been married 10 years. You're more vulnerable with your spouse than you are with your children. And so it is a very different type of relationship. But you're also talking about a reoccurrence of offenses over 10 years. And you can let go and let go and let go and let go. But for everybody, there's a threshold. For everybody, there's like a point where you're just like, man, it's not as easy to let go as it once was. You know what I mean? Especially if it's a repeatable offense. You know what I mean? But in a real practical sense, I was listening to a psychologist. He was talking about contempt in marriage. And he was just talking about on the most basic level, like, what does that look like? And he was using examples like even an eye roll. Like, and not just like a
nonverbal,
not like a, oh, she's silly, you know, not like that, but like a, that type of disgust, contempt, whatever. Things like, you know, using sarcasm kind of as a joke, but I'm really trying to hurt that person. And even if you're not aware of it, like you're trying to hurt that person. And those are like the subtle, you know, types that we got to look out for.
One other thing that I was thinking about earlier when we were talking was becoming highly critical. That's what I will notice in myself is if he's like, I feel like I can't let up. Everything I'm seeing is, and I need you to adjust. There's an adjustment that constantly has to be made. Nobody wants to live in that bubble. You know what I'm saying? Like no one wants to always have to keep readjusting themselves. And there's, you know, space for us to grow and stuff. But that is like a red flag, I think is what we were kind of talking about earlier. That is my red flag is like, okay, something's constantly wrong. Something's off.
Isn't that interesting? So even though you're not vocalizing or maybe not showing it physically internally, you're like, why'd he do that? Why'd he say that? He could have done that better. Did he really, you know, so it can be internal as well as the external.
And I think sometimes we can take out stuff on our spouse that they never did. You know, it's like I got in traffic on the way home. And I got road rage.
It's the overflow.
And I didn't pause to carry it, you know, to like let it be. And I carried it in. And now I can't admit that I had road rage. You know what I mean? So it's not that that's happened.
No.
So like one of the best gifts the only gift I remember that we got on our wedding day was from her Aunt Jerry, and it was a plant, and it had a little note attached and it said, leave this or plant it outside of your front door, whatever door you use to enter your house, and every day that you come home, pluck a leaf, drop the leaf, and drop your cares at the door.
That's good.
And
it was called a trouble tree.
Trouble tree. I didn't know that. This is the only gift I remember, literally from her wedding.
I remember.
Sorry to everybody else.
Should have done better.
Sorry to
tree. But I think so much of it is like a self-awareness. Like every one of y'all have said, you know, why am I inside? I'm thinking, why did she do this? Why did he say that? And I think that when you're young in marriage, it's so easy to not be self-aware.
Yeah.
Totally.
To always feel like it's always the other person's fault. And to never really just consider, man, is this because I'm insecure? Or is this because I have baggage that I'm, or, you know, or a bad day at work or whatever the case is. I do feel like sometimes there's a lack of that,
Totally.
in current culture. So
Yeah, I think just being still, like people can't handle that of just being still and assessing, like, what am I feeling? And I remember Matt Chandler had a sermon to men, and it was like an emotional chart. And he's like, sometimes I just point and tell my wife, that's how I'm feeling. You know what I mean? And if you can identify that, that's like 90% of it. Just to, how are you feeling? Because that changes the tone. Like if I'm telling her I'm feeling lonely and we're having an issue, that changes her approach to me.
Totally.
Because it's like, I can't help how I'm feeling. There's a quote that feelings are real, but they're not always reliable. And it's like, if I can at least express the feeling, then she can at least know the filter.
It
that's coming
elicits
out.
my compassion instead of me trying to understand what is going on here.
Yeah.
So
I'm always trying to keep you on your toes. So.
yeah.
done.
Okay, let's see what chat said. If I were the devil and wanted to destroy a young married couple, how would I do it? Give me 5 bullet points. Okay. Make them experts on each other's failures. Critical.
Yeah.
All right. Convince them that unmet needs are proof that they married the wrong person. Get them to stop praying together. Make them pursue careers, hobbies, and screens instead of each other. Huge.
That's
Huge.
Careers, hobby, and screens. Yeah.
Huge.
That's huge.
Yeah, just your
Especially-
careers. Like, holy,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Because it's so integral to your life
Right.
Yeah.
and your development. You spend more
Your
time there than
identity.
you do awake with your spouse.
Yeah.
And all the relationships that want to stem from that. That was
Like
another thing.
your work wife
Yeah.
or your work husband. You know what I mean?
What
Where
happened
it's
to
like,
us?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What happened to us?
Right.
Like when did culture devolve to the place where even a term like that
Right.
Yeah.
is a joke?
acceptable.
It's acceptable as
Yeah.
a joke even.
We were at a graduation this weekend, and one of the speakers said that, and I cringed inside. I was like, "Oh, don't tell everybody all your that should be private. Deal with this with the Lord later on."
Stood and
Type
said,
of thing.
"Heresy."
I don't even know they belong to Christ, but it was still like,
Yeah.
So I think that especially for younger, and I'm not picking on younger couples, I want this to strengthen younger
Yeah.
couples.
Yeah.
But I do think the idea of work is a big deal. I honestly think it can be more difficult in your 30s because you're really trying, like by the time you're in your 30s, you're pretty much set in your career, generally speaking. And so if you're in your 20s though, that's more, you're still trying to figure out life. You're trying to figure out, what do I love doing, but also like trying to have some fun along the way. And I've seen hobbies become like a major wedge between a lot of couples. And it's usually a hobby that's very benign.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. But it can form a wedge between the couples if they're not careful. The fifth one is this: isolate them from community and keep them out of church. I think chat knows that I'm a pastor.
I was going to say this.
It's like based on your previous searches.
Right.
Yeah, clear that history.
Yeah, that one's huge. We've seen
Yeah.
some relationships dissolve, and that is
I mean,
huge.
COVID 2020.
Yeah.
So like the last 6 years has been like, how do you have a community that's coming around to support you, because you've been isolated physically. And I think a lot of the times people look at their circles that overlap and don't realize it's only because of the overlap that I have relationships. It's not because I've actually intentionally gone out and sought them. And when you try to dump 100% of who you are on to your spouse, she should be the primary. But she's not the only
friends.
person for
You
me.
You
that
need
way.
friends.
She shouldn't be
Yeah.
the person I'm
Yeah.
confessing to, and I'm looking and I'm saying I don't know how to lead. Like there's certain times where I come to her with answers, and there's certain times I come to her with questions. And some of the answers are because I have other relationships to go to help sort it out.
That's good.
Yeah.
So I want you two to talk about your friendship. So one thing I say to young men all the time: I do not have friends in my life that bash or make fun of their wives,
Right.
because I don't bash and make fun of my wife.
Yeah.
Like I just don't allow friends like that into my life because I don't want that to rub off on me. And what I've seen in your friendship, like I'm not sure how much you guys talk about marriage and stuff like that. I know you talk about life in general and all, but I am interested to hear how you feel like your friendship has strengthened your marriages, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think we can hit different layers on it. So I think there is a difference in having a safe place and having there are different layers to your friendship. So when we're talking about this friendship, just to give a parameter, is Lindsey is one of my very few. Like you're one of my few.
She's like Peter, James, and John.
Yeah, she's one of the three. So my conversation with Lindsey about our marriage is probably going to look different than it would with the 12 for Jesus and the masses. But
sorry, Lindsey.
No,
I love you too.
She still loves you. So, but I will even say within that context, there is not, I don't know of any time I can think between the two of us, her talking about Stan or me talking about you, that it has been a bash fest or that it has been something that even is an intentional derogatory or bringing down. Yeah. If there is a struggle or a problem, it's more of like, hey, can you pray for me right now?
For sure.
Like it's more of I'm going through this, not of let me project onto you. Totally. And I think that's the difference of that foundation of a 100%. Good marriage. Is that if I needed to talk to her about you, she'd let me though.
Right.
But I think it would be in the context of, okay, let me bear my burdens for a moment, and then she'd bring me back on track.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I think for both of you, your character would allow, you would allow Lindsey to just let it fly.
Yes.
But your character would pull her back to a place of reality. 100%. And I think that's beautiful in friendship.
And I would pray that everyone has that. And I know that it's a very rare thing. And so I'm thankful to have that in my life. And I would say community, as you guys were talking about a moment ago, matters so much more than people could ever realize, especially in marriage. And you think, well, we've got each other, we're good. But I'm telling you, there is something to having those safe people in your life who will spur you on to fight for your marriage when you might be in a funk. For whenever there is something, when you're wrong, when I'm wrong, I'm like, you need to tell me I'm wrong, Lindsey. Call me out and call me up. And so I think having those people, but also inviting them into your life is so huge, because without that invitation, nobody can come and speak to me. They can't speak those words of wisdom if I'm not going to take them. So
what does PD say a lot of times about be careful who you share your hurt with, because I can't remember how he says it, but basically they may just join your team instead of helping you. They may take on your offense, kind of thing like that. And I think we see that more in friendships than we see the calling up and calling out and walking with and bearing the burden.
Yeah, the courage to actually confront, hey, this is what you're saying is not okay.
Right.
That's a really rare thing.
Right. Or Stan is actually a really good man, regardless of how you feel right now.
Yeah.
Amen.
Right, Lindsey?
Yes,
Lynn, sorry, I feel like I cut you off.
No, I think also I echo everything Joy said already. I think also there is the example set of just, and you've talked about this a lot from the stage, but the crossover that you have with other people. You need to be around people who are going and doing what you want to be going and doing, and I think our crossover in particular is when we're doing life, when we're Marco Poloing or texting or whatever, our crossover is exemplary. I can look and say, JoJo is handling this in this way. That is such a good example. And I need to go handle my business, and I think from that standpoint, I glean the most at this stage of life, where I'm like, okay, she's handling things. I know what her heart is doing right now, not just with you, but life in general. But like, I know how her heart is feeling, but she's addressing it from this standpoint. And I can say, okay, let me spur her on, or let me pray in this circumstance, or whatever it is. And so I think sometimes it's not in the words communicated, but it's in the knowing, which comes from other moments of life as well, which is really special. If she will text me and be like, hey, you haven't said anything in 2 weeks. Where are you? How are you? You know, things like that, where there's that string of knowing really helps when it comes to moments where there are more difficulties, you know? Yeah.
So what y'all are saying, to synthesize it, you're saying that a strong friendship contributes to a strong marriage.
Yeah, totally.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because they have invited us in, but Lindsey has invited me into that part of her world, where again, if something goes off the rails or goes off the tracks, I am able to say, but remember. And that's not just because of their relationship, but Lindsey's relationship with the Lord. Right. Like, we can call back the truths that we have walked through and all of those sorts of things. So I think that's That's
Yeah.
huge for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And it's not just crisis management. What I'm hearing
Mhm.
you guys say, and I know this because
Yeah, right.
I see y'all talking all the time,
Right.
but they're walking through life together. And so when the major crisis hits, they
Yeah.
already know like how this is going to play out because of all the minor crises of my kid, threw something at another kid at school today. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so I think what we have in a lot of community, even Christian community, is we have crisis friendships. We're like, I'll confess my sin to you
Yeah.
when it's like
That's
going to
good.
destroy my marriage, or I will come to you and I'll tell you when things are about to blow up. But what I see is I see friendships that are just doing life together, and as a default, they're strengthening the relationship.
Yeah, because how easy is it, like you were talking about work wives or just the time we spend at work, how easy is it for something to happen and no one know? And then after the fact, you're calling in for help. You're calling in for the troops. But if
emergency.
along that way, someone
right.
had just that checkpoint every once in a while, had just seen or known or been a part of that. But I think oftentimes people don't want those checkpoints.
Yeah.
So I think there's a difference in not wanting them
Yeah.
and isolating yourself, whether it's in your marriage or yourself, and then inviting people in.
Yeah.
And so I think the benefit to inviting people in is asking for, it's a level of accountability. And I know we don't like that word, but it is.
And I think also putting yourself in a position to find those people. Being with people who are like-minded requires you to be in a place where you can see those people.
Right.
And I think that can be very hard. Just thinking about speaking to other people, that can be very hard to put yourself in a position to line up with people who are like-minded. But it is so necessary. That's why getting your booty in a seat at church. That's why finding it's like get to church. Finding people who may be your people is so important.
Yeah, and I would say not even just being in church, but being the ecclesia, of being
Yeah,
involved,
that's right.
of being committed, of actually serving the church.
Being faithful to
The
it.
hands and the feet of Christ. You know what I mean? Like the relationships you have when you build those kind of networking opportunities by serving, they're deep. They're
Oh,
deep
yeah,
bonds.
for sure,
You know,
for sure.
you go through war together
For
in
sure.
some ways.
Yeah.
What we found in church leadership is that we have as strong of relationships within the church body through serve teams as we do through life groups.
Yeah.
And that was like
it's like its own life group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. And so I agree. I also think it's about permission though. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is why I say like I explicitly go to certain men in my life and I invite them in. I say, I need you to ask me hard questions.
Yeah.
The trouble is though, sometimes, and they got to be the right people, because sometimes if I invite Stan in and I say, ask me hard questions, every 2 months, ask me some hard questions. If Stan has some stuff to hide, Stan's not coming to ask me hard questions
That's right.
because he's afraid that I'm going to be like, I'm good.
Reciprocated.
What about
Yeah.
you?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And so that's why it's essential that they be the right people,
Yeah.
which is what you're saying. But man, I think that's such a critical part that isn't really talked about enough,
Yeah.
and the
And I think
example.
it's probably definitely harder for men. I mean, I know that's a stereotype, but I could see where it would be more
Most things are
difficult for men.
stereotypes for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think it's interesting when we're doing premarital counseling with couples, like it's like everything's on the table. I mean, we're talking about everything. You know, we end the whole session talking, of course, about intimacy, and it's like no questions off limits, and they take full advantage of that. But once someone says, I do, it's almost as though it is very difficult for them to allow a voice in. So whether that's, a pastor who's walked through that with you or a friend, it's just different.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that vulnerability line happens there. It's like we're actually in the marriage now. But I think it's a missing element and a missing link. And so I think you have to be careful who
For
you
sure,
invite in.
for sure.
You have to
Oh
be
my
careful,
God.
those voices of wisdom.
Don't let in loose lips.
No. Yes.
Right.
But like Lindsey was saying, there are people who you want to go, and it may be PD who says it as well, a step ahead of you, your peer with you, and then you also want to be pouring into people underneath of you in a discipleship sort of way. And that doesn't have to be like any sort of parameters, but just in your daily life, having those three areas are so huge. And in marriage, I think we miss that area of inviting people in to ask those hard questions because it's almost like, well, we'll just handle our business.
Yeah.
What happens behind closed doors, whether we're fighting or whether we're not being intimate or whether whatever's happening, that's our business.
Right.
But it's just, and listen, marriage matters, and there has to be confidentiality. But again, if we're talking community and foundations, I think that's a part of it.
So what, like from your perspective, why do you think that is? Why? Because I've seen the same pattern.
Yeah.
After the I do's, there's like a wall. I can't tell you how many people we've counseled and we've said, listen, we've done premarital. Let's have 2 or 3 sessions of postmarital.
Yeah.
Let's just see where things are.
And they say yes during
They say
premarital.
yes, but not
They
one
don't mean
single
it.
time. They don't mean it.
Nobody
right?
follows up.
So I'm like, what is
Yeah.
that? Where does that come from?
Hearing you guys talk, it kind of reminds me of what Paul said to Galatians. Oh, you foolish Galatians, are you trying to finish in the flesh what we started in the spirit?
Wow.
And I think sometimes when you get married, that I'm a husband now goes up, the title goes up, and now that expectation of what a husband is goes up,
have to
and
feel
you
it no
can't
matter what
chink
I'm
the
doing,
armor.
yeah.
I may be decaying inside because the armor has completely prevented any sort of something to get in or get out, kind of like the Dead Sea principle. And so I think it's hard when you get titles because you start to say, I can't let you down. But letting you down, I mean, I've already let her down. You know what I mean? Like the moment we got married, I'm still a sinner who's fallen short. And so I'm going to let her down no matter what I tried to do. And so I think that's the hard part is you feel like now I'm carrying an extra responsibility, but you're still just human. You're still just 2 sinners who are trying to figure it out. And I don't know if that's the answer, but that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah. And I think some of it's demonic as far as spiritual opposition.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the enemy, whether it's those titles that kind of mask you up a little bit and keep you from reality, whether it's the community not being there and you want to handle things on your own. But there's pressures that start to mount.
Yeah.
And when those pressures mount, you want to say, I can bear up under this thing. But it's too great. You need people. You need to be going to the Lord. I lived at the altar the first 3 years of our marriage because of me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like, I
dude,
mean,
I get it.
he
I
had
should've been
stuff.
there.
You know what I'm
I get
saying?
it.
He should have been at that. No, I'm just kidding. He said that way. But I lived there. But they, do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
for sure. And listen to me. Every honest Christian
Right.
who is married understands exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Even if they're not living at the altar,
Right.
they're living at the altar in their heart.
Yeah.
Because they're just like, Father, what is happening
Yeah,
right now?
absolutely. And so I think there's spiritual pressures that come that if you don't have the correct tools to address those things, they can beat your tail into the ground,
For sure.
Yeah, and I'll throw out another PDism. Compare and compete, you live in defeat. And I think sometimes you look at, like I would look at you guys, if you guys said, hey, let's do a post-mortem or
Postmortem, not dead.
What do you call that? What'd you call that?
Wow.
Post-nuptial? Is this what you're calling it?
Post-marital counseling.
Post-marital counseling. Yeah, like not post-marriage, but
Right.
I think I'd be like, oh, I don't have my stuff together.
Yeah,
I can't get in front of them.
I get
You know what I
that.
mean? It's a challenge.
Yeah.
And I think the older I get, the more I realize maybe sometimes it's the younger folks who actually could teach me a little bit about my marriage, because it's like you look at them and you're like, man, they look so happy. And so it's like the older I get, the more I'm like,
mind games.
the young folks seem to have like, wait, I don't know.
But also the older I get, the more I feel that pressure of I should have my stuff together by now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm a little more reluctant to let somebody in
Yeah.
to see like, oh, I'm not all there.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's just this constant, no matter where you are in what season of marriage or age or development or whatever the case, there's always a unique struggle in that season, which again brings me back to this idea of covenant.
Yeah.
That it's in good, it's in bad,
Yeah.
it's in rain, it's in sunshine, it's in every season, that there is a vow that I'm giving my life to this woman, and nothing, myself, her, anything else, nothing's going to come between that. And I think that when we lose that ideal of what it means to make a vow, till death do us part, till death do us part. And not just to say death do us part and we'll be miserable our whole lives,
Right.
but to say till death do us part, and man, we are going to figure this out.
Right.
Like we're going to thrive.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it may take
We're
years,
gonna
but
put
we're
work
going to
in.
thrive.
Right.
We're going to do the work, bro.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know. I can be pessimistic at times, but man, I think as a culture we've lost that. I think we've lost that grit and that grind and that commitment. But anyway, so here's the thing. We need to wrap this up. You guys are amazing. This is why we asked you to be the very first episode, because we're like sitting here and I'm just like, there's like such wisdom just pouring out. So we're very grateful.
Good job.
So this is what we want though. Okay. So I want to wrap up every session like this by asking the couples the question, what are you doing and or plan to do to further your friendship in marriage? And the reason I want to do this every episode is because every couple is going to have unique answers, but it's also because the empty nest is coming.
Yeah.
It's coming.
My baby.
It's coming. Dude, listen, we're about to lose our second one. Okay. Now we got 3 more, but we're launching our second one. But I'm just saying it's one more step closer to saying, man, one day it's just going to be me and her.
Yeah.
That's right.
And man, I want to make it strong now.
Yeah.
So it's strong then.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear what you guys are either doing now, what you plan to do to strengthen that friendship.
Well, I'm a list person, so I have a running couple different lists, but one of them is a bucket list. And this year we did celebrate our 10-year anniversary by going to Portugal. That was on our list. But the bucket list item that we were originally planning to do was the running of the bulls. And so
Let's go.
One of those things where it's like, let's get a little bit
was not on my
adventurous. Let's
list, let me be
maybe
clear.
go to the hospital together in a foreign country. Like, that'd be kind of cool.
Listen, y'all like to look and say, you're my ride or die. Are you?
That's
Are
right.
you willing to
you
die?
ready?
Will you pull the bullhorn out of my chest?
That is
No. The answer's no.
So just having adventures together. I mean, we
Yeah.
talked about that on the way over here, is of doing the things that you really want to do together, and making the time for it, and pulling away. I think so many times you kind of feel like an anchor has you down, especially with kids, especially with young kids, I would imagine. I don't have older kids, so we don't know that. But of making the time to say, we're going to actually just get away. We're going to go do our own thing. So like when we went to Asheville and it snowed that weekend, and we're like, we're going to drive white-knuckled through the mountains, to get up there. But we're still going to get up there, and everything was closed, and we just played in the snow, and it's just having a relationship that says what we can, where we're at with what we have, and doing that together.
Yeah. I think intentionality with laughing a lot is, I have every intention to carry that into the future.
Yeah.
And I know that seems so minute, but it's something you can do every day that it almost like sets the landscape for what you want your relationship to look like. There's a joy and a playfulness about it, that there are heavy days and not every day is full of giddy laughter. You can't be. We've shared heavy days together, but I think that persistent joy and sense of, like he's saying, adventure, but feeding into that with everyday decisions, dance parties, with our babies and things like that are just like, I'm going to fill our home with the good things while we can. And I think that will help us set us on a trajectory to pursue those things when our babies are gone. Yeah. And we're just dancing.
Well, you guys, this has been so rich. I'm so super grateful for y'all taking the time to be a part. I know our people are going to be better and stronger for it. So super grateful for y'all being here. I'm going to ask Joy to close this out in prayer.
Yeah. Let's go. All right. Father, thank you so much for great examples of marriages that we can look at within the church walls. I thank you that Stan and Lindsey have been open today to talk about their struggles, to talk about their celebrations, to share with us practical things of how we can be friends, how we can create community, and how we can just be vulnerable before each other. I pray that you would take these words, that you would take this podcast, that you would bless the lives of those who are listening, that you would strengthen their marriages, and that you would strengthen their lives. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Amen and amen. Thanks so much for being here with us today. Come back for episode 2 when we drop next week.